Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, Amy Fitzgibbon here, news correspondent with the Irish Farmers Journal. Welcome to this week's podcast. On today's podcast, we discuss a case of BSE in County Galway, the UK's exit from the single market, hear from Fianna Fáil agriculture spokesman Charlie McConalogue on the call for a tillage crisis fund, and get an impression of dairy farms in western France. But first, BSE. The Department of Agriculture has confirmed an atypical case of what's also more commonly known as mad cow disease in an 18-year-old cow in County Galway. This is the first case of BSE to be found in Ireland since 2015. News editor Patrick Donohoe sat down with market specialist Phelim O'Neill to find out what this means for the Irish beef trade and human health.
Phelim, BSE is back. First case since 2015. What can you tell us, and is it serious?
I would challenge the use of the terminology to say BSE is back. Patrick, is not back. BSE is well on the way to complete eradication, and the fact that this is the first case we've had since the summer of 2015. The previous one we had to that was in 2013. And it's a fact of life that there will be outlying random cases of BSE atypical.
So, exactly that. What do we know about the case? It is atypical. Where was the cow? Tell us about the animal.
It's an atypical case of BSE, one of four, I think, since 2002. And bear in mind, back in 2002, we had over 300 cases of BSE. This is the second one in about 4 years, so that puts in some sort of context just how rare it is. It occurred in an 18-year-old cow that started its life in Munster. It has been found in an aggregate. It died on farm in County Galway. It's been found as part of the surveillance programme on BSE in knackeries, where all animals over 4 years old that die on farm, all fallen stock, are tested. And it was part of that surveillance programme that this animal has been found. So the reality of life is, from a point of view of impact on Irish agriculture, it is negligible. In fact, it's none.
And on human health?
As for human health, there's absolutely no risk whatsoever. Ireland operates under control risk BSE status, where all of the parts of the animal that are in any way linked to the animal's brain are removed from the food chain. So there's absolutely no risk to human health whatsoever.
How does this impact on our beef markets and our export markets that have come back in since BSE has been cleared 20 years ago?
And again, I suppose the positive news here is that it doesn't impact in any way whatsoever. Every single beef market that we have opened outside the EU since 2006, it has been done on the basis of the control risk status that we currently have. There's one higher status that we could have, negligible risk, which we did have for a short time in 2015. The difference between negligible risk and control risk is that some of the products that are currently disposed of that have to be destroyed no longer have to be destroyed. They can go through the normal disposal process, and therefore there's less of an awful disposal cost. The other thing is, in terms of third country exports, that's exports outside the EU, if you had negligible risk status for those markets, you could get all ages of beef away. At the moment, with our controlled risk status, in some cases limited to 30 or 36 months old cattle.
So you're telling me no risk to humans, no risk to our beef exports. So just guide us through and guide the listeners through how this happens and the kind of layers of surveillance and testing and traceability that we have as a result of the Department of Agriculture.
Well, I suppose if we go back over the history lesson in BSE, it was really discovered in the mid-1990s. It was as a result of feeding meat and bone meal to cattle as part of livestock feed that hadn't had all of the contaminants killed in it. It wasn't heated to the correct temperature. Once that was identified and that type of feed, meat and bone meal, was removed from animal feed back in the late 1990s, and thereafter the incidence of BSE went down and down and down. The typical cases of BSE were the ones that were caused by that. Random cases, atypical BSE, are ones that occur for that reason. There's just no reason whatsoever for it. And if we think of the Irish herd, and we process about 1.75 million cattle every year, we have found one animal every 2 years, if you like, over the past 4 years. In 2008, for example, there were 23 cases of BSE, so it is totally on the way out. Now, the industry still has the control procedures in place for that. All of the spinal cord, all of the associated parts in the animal are removed in the processing stage. And in addition to that, any animal, and of course all animals as they go through the factory, are inspected prior to slaughter and by veterinarians on the line in the slaughter process itself. any animal that dies on farm is treated as a suspicious case over 4 years old. In other words, it's assumed that there might be something there. Now, of all the animals that have been tested in this way, we have found 2 examples since 2013 in this case, in this atypical case. So there's a scrutiny process in place. It will be picked up if it's there, but we shouldn't be unduly concerned about that, because I say it has absolutely no impact on our markets whatsoever. It has no impact on human health, and if this had happened 10 years ago, it would have been a mere footnote in the statistics that are published by the Department of Agriculture.
Watertight.
Absolutely.
Phelim, thank you very much, and you can read more about BSE and the isolated case discovered in County Galway in this week's Irish Farmers Journal and on farmersjournal.ie.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
So we do not seek membership of the single market. Instead, we seek the greatest possible access to it through a new, comprehensive, bold and ambitious free trade agreement.
As you've just heard, British Prime Minister Theresa May confirmed this week that the UK will be fully exiting the EU's single market after Brexit. May also said that the UK will be pursuing trade agreements with countries such as New Zealand, India, China and the United States. News editor Patrick Dunho spoke to agribusiness editor Owen Lowry and market specialist Phelim O'Neill to reflect on the clearest roadmap yet for post-Brexit Europe.
Hard Brexit, talk of trade deals with other of our main trading partners and potential trading partners. Owen, this isn't good news for Ireland.
No, I think it leaves Ireland in a very precarious position. I think the one statement that I took from the speech was that she was going for a global Great Britain, and that slogan or phrase was relevant throughout her speech. She's very much focusing Britain on global trade and opening up the UK to trade with other countries.
Hard Brexit, it's very much pulling out one of the customs union, the trading union. Is there going to be a hard border in Ireland, Owen?
From everything that she said, she left it with no uncertain terms that there is no option available to stay with 1 foot in the EU and 1 foot out. So that would indicate that we're looking at a hard Brexit situation, which would indicate that we're going to have a border situation again.
Phelim, turning to you, New Zealand, India, America, Canada. Theresa May outlined these markets and countries as ones that Britain and the UK is going to go after.
It was very interesting that she name-checked the countries that I suppose Britain historically has had a relationship with through the Commonwealth, and it's also interesting that within those, United States, India and Brazil are the top 3 beef exporting countries in the world. They export huge quantities of other agri-produce as well. But you can visualise a situation if the UK pursues trade deals actively and quickly with these countries, as they say they're going to do whenever they leave the EU. Well, then that presents a serious level of competition for Irish agri-food, particularly beef. Paint a picture for us. How much beef, how much dairy, broad strokes. How important is Britain to us as a farming nation? From an agriculture point of view, it's incredibly important. For beef, it's absolutely essential. Even with the collapse in the value of sterling in 2016, we still exported over half of our beef production there, 270,000 tonnes, 52% of all our exports. And then just turning on some of the other commodities, on pig meat it's roughly about a third, on dairy the same, although over half our cheese goes to the UK. And probably about a third of our lamb would go there as well. Now, I suppose you can visualise in a new arrangement where the UK is outside the European Union. The UK is the largest lamb exporter in the community at present in the EU28. You can visualise a situation where if there were tariffs applied through WTO default arrangements, that the UK would find it difficult to export its lamb to the continent. We would find it difficult to export our lamb there, but we could probably displace some of theirs in the continent. So there will be some movements like that, but in the overall picture, Irish agri-produce exports are going to take a huge hit if the UK exit from the European community is as robust as was outlined. Speaking to me as somebody who voted in the Brexit referendum, what's the general feeling of people in Northern Ireland? I suppose the interesting thing about the referendum and the timing of the referendum, commodity prices in Northern Ireland at that stage were at a very, very low point, whether it was beef, dairy, the whole lot. farmers had a particularly negative outlook, and they took the option, or took the vision at the time, that things could really be no worse outside the EU, that they would try anything at that point. And actually, ironically, with the further weakening of sterling after the vote, it increased their single farm payment dramatically. So Northern Ireland farmers so far have seen a pick-up and a benefit from the referendum result. And people, I suppose, that would be involved in the sheep trade up north, where almost half the lamb production comes south for processing, but a third of the dairy, a third of the milk comes south for processing. People that would be taking a longer view there would be concerned, all right. But overall, as I say, such was the depth of feeling of negativity and depression in farming at the time of the vote, then the view was things would be no worse. And I think there would still be a core element that would think that it probably up north as well gets wrapped into the wider political debate, which of course complicates things further and brings in non-economic factors to it. But it certainly, for Northern Ireland farmers as well as farmers south of the border, it is certainly going to be a challenging time ahead. There's no doubt about that.
Owen, you regularly on your agribusiness pages talk to the CEOs of our big food exporters, the Glanbias, the Keepacks, the Dairy Golds. What's the agribusiness sense of this? Is, because we had the initial shock around sterling and the volatility that has continued since June's vote. Has it settled in any way, or Irish agribusinesses who are exporting to the UK, is it still kind of, we really don't know what's going on here?
Well, I think it's different across the whole sector. So I think if we look at the global picture, half of our exports go to the UK. If we break that down and we look at the PLCs and the big multinational companies, it isn't that big a deal for them. Maybe 10, 15, up to 25% in certain circumstances could be going to the UK out of all their global operations. But drill down to the next level, up to 70, 80%, and then go to your small to medium enterprises where they're making, they started making, a local produce, they started supplying the local Tesco, and then they start to export through Tesco or something like that into the UK. It could actually be 90 or 100% of that small businesses business in any 1 year. So it could have huge implications for a lot of businesses in Ireland, and that has knock-on effects for farmers, I suppose. And but one of the more significant things is that when I talk to the CEOs of these businesses, what are they doing? They all have Brexit committees now at this stage. They're looking at the risk. Can anybody be
Brexit proof?
I think the whole thing is to try keep abreast of what is happening on a weekly or a daily basis. It's very difficult to do. This is going to be a long drawn out process. We could be talking about this in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time. I think the immediate short term impact we have seen is with sterling, but I think businesses, and rightly so, should be planning for what the worst case scenario is. What you'd be more worried about is that how low down on the pecking order agriculture and food is, especially given in an Irish context where, what are the opportunities for Ireland out of this? It may well be that we could get financial services into the country. It's not that we are going to lose a percentage of our agricultural exports.
Is the government, no government will, I presume, will ever admit to this, but would a government be happy to say, okay, we're going to take in Commerzbank and Deutsche Bank from the City of London. We may have to sail our agriculture down the river here, but we're going to get 30,000 jobs as a result of it.
And this is the biggest fear for Irish farmers, is that agriculture and agribusiness becomes the sacrificial lamb, so that the economy can attract more financial service type firms into it. And that's not a situation that we want. And I suppose, as we cover in the Farmers Journal this week, we look at the implications of this recent speech by Theresa May and the implications for the Irish agricultural sector. There is very little that a business can do aside from looking at new markets, but that is not an easy
you can't just
thing
open
to do.
The door, yeah?
Well, simply just look at cheese. We produce cheddar cheese for the UK market predominantly. If we decide that we want to go to international markets with that, they necessarily don't eat cheddar cheese. But our manufacturing process produces cheddar cheese. So it's going to take a long time to change an industry to supply new markets.
Phil, again, you're armed with the cloak of knowledge when it comes to the divvying up of payments from Westminster. Assuming that there is, and Theresa May has said that there's going to be a full withdrawal, the UK isn't going to be a contributor to the Common Agricultural Policy, subsequently isn't going to be a recipient of it. So taxation and money raised to Westminster gets divvied up and paid out. Where does agriculture come in the likes of healthcare, education, etc.?
The difficulty for agriculture in the UK context, which of course is applicable to Northern Ireland, is that it represents about 0.7% of the UK economy. It's negligible, it's tiny. UK Farm Minister and indeed various government ministers would have indicated, look, they will have a farm policy. I think they have more or less ruled out direct payments at this stage, and we would be suggesting, or we would be expecting, that it'll be something around environmental schemes that will attract the support. So that remains for the UK farming unions, including the Ulster Farmers Union up north, to negotiate that and to be as tough as they can there. For ourselves, for south of the border, you're right, we go into the CAP negotiations, which are about to begin now, or which indeed you could say have begun. There'll be a consultation formally launched in the next week or two, and the Commissioner's going to bring forward a paper by the end of this year outlining the broad line of what will be the negotiating points. They're going into that with the UK funds going to be depleted by about €10 billion or thereabouts with the UK withdrawal. And aside from all of the other difficulties that will be for farmers in the next round of CAP negotiations, because animal welfare, and more importantly environmental issues, are going to dominate this next CAP discussion. That is a reality. And now on top of that, we're going to have the budget issue. That's going to be particularly difficult. Turning as to where this leaves, and Owen has dealt there with the market exposure of the Irish agri-food industry to the UK market. And you can't turn that supertanker overnight. It's a 10-year process to reorientate where you might focus your markets. So what's needed in the meantime, and I think that our government has to be pursuing Brussels on this, and this is outside the Common Agriculture Policy. This is a transition arrangement to reflect the fact whenever we moved into the European Union, there was about a 10-year transition period where we adjusted to the common market as it was back then. Well, a similar adjustment programme is required actually for the exit process, where a member state like ourselves is losing our main export market, as it'll be no longer part of the community, or it'll certainly be a very different export market from what has been.
Finally, is it all doom and gloom? What about Mrs. Murphy with her 12 suckler cows? Is there any positives out of what Theresa May has said, other than we now know what the plan is?
From an Irish agriculture perspective, it's impossible to see any positives in Brexit, such as the level of our exposure to that market. You talk about our colloquial Mrs. Murphy with her 12 cows. I suppose the fact of life is that the small part-time farmer for a long, long time now in rural Ireland hasn't been 100% funded and supported by agriculture. It has been a part-time business. And therefore you might, if you want to put a positive on it, say that the consequences for him won't be as dire as they will be for the person that's involved in a full-time enterprise that has all the labour and costs associated with that, but a greater threat and more limited market opportunities because of Brexit. I think they're the one that is really, really at risk from this situation that's developing.
Phelim, Owen, thank you very much. You both write in this week's Farmers Journal and on farmersjournal.ie. Thank you.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
On Thursday this week, the Dáil will vote on a private member's motion from Fianna Fáil to create a support fund for tillage farmers who lost most of their harvest due to bad weather in 2016. Fianna Fáil agriculture spokesman Charlie McConalogue spoke to news correspondent Odile Evans about the motion outside Dáil Éireann.
Charlie, today, the pressure is on now for the government to establish a tillage crisis fund.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we shouldn't have to be at this point, because what Fianna Fáil is doing today is bringing forward a private member's motion, which will be voted on in the Dáil, seeking the establishment of a crisis fund to compensate those farmers who lost significant portions of their crop, particularly the farmers along the west coast and some inland counties, as a result of the unprecedented harvest weather last year, which meant that they weren't able to actually get into the fields at the time, and many had very severe losses as a result. It's an issue we've been campaigning on since September and since the Ploughing Championships, and consistently since then. Myself and Jackie Cahill and Senator Paul Daly and the Oireachtas Committee have raised it regularly and campaigned on all fronts. But really the Minister should have responded by now. We shouldn't have to be bringing it to a head in the Dáil today. I'm very confident that the motion will pass. I'm very confident we'll get a lot of support. But what I'm not confident of yet is that the Minister actually will respond to the will of the Dáil today and put a crisis fund in place. The IFA are also holding a protest coinciding with the private member's motion outside the Dáil, and there'll be a significant number of farmers from different parts of the country here to try and have their voice heard, to try and actually get a response at long last from the Minister. But really the situation facing them is that we're on the back of 3 or 4 years where there hasn't been profitability in the cereal sector, and to come on the back of that now for these farmers to face it along the west, to face into a harvest where they've lost high percentages in many cases of their crops, puts them in an exceptionally difficult position. It means that they haven't been able to meet the merchant bills and many of the bills that they've been facing. They're under exceptional financial pressure, and for many of them it's meaning that they're really questioning their future in the tillage sector and whether they're going to keep at it.
And where do you see a pot of money becoming available from, and how much do you think would be needed?
Our estimate is that between €4 and €5 million would be sufficient to cover the needs, and there is the funding within the Department of Agriculture. There was an underspend in the current budget last year, which has been carried over into this year. It was 86 million of an underspend. So there's more than enough capacity within the department, thankfully, to be able to meet the funding need. Unfortunately, what there isn't the will as of yet to actually direct some of those funds towards this very acute problem and regional problem specific to certain parts of the country.
And how would you see the fund or whatever, if it is established, how would you see it being rolled out to farmers? Has Fianna Fáil made any plans around that?
I think we would need the first thing we need is agreement in relation to the principle and the fact that a fund can be put in place, and then I think the structure as to the evidence is going to be required and it needs to be submitted in order to make a successful application of the fund would then have to be agreed. There is precedence there for it. In 2009, 2010 there was a fund similar to the one we're proposing now established for the horticulture sector as a result of weather loss back then as well. So there is a sort of a model there which has worked before, and something similar to that can be put in place now.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Last week, a group of Irish dairy farmers visited a number of farms in western France. News reporter Thomas Hubert accompanied them on the trip and asked one dairy farmer about his impressions of dairy farms in this part of the world.
I'm in France following a tour of several farms here with the Kilnamartyra group from County Cork, and I'm with one of the members, Andrew Deneen, who's been visiting a number of farms using various forms of partnerships here. Andrew, maybe first, what was the most striking for you on this trip? What will you take home with you?
France is a beautiful country. Dairying is, we all produce milk, but the farming there is done totally differently. Good production, low solids, which would be, probably the opposite to our system, indoor system. We've an outdoor system. Just the cost structure there is much higher. I think we're in a good situation where we are because we have a grass-based system, but I think we monitor costs in our grass-based system a lot better, in much more detail, with the help of the Farmers Journal and Teagasc there, which have given us good guidance over the years. I don't think this applies to dairy farming in general in France. They just don't analyse their systems, what I think, good enough.
We looked at a research dairy farm and we visited a number of farms, and I saw you take out your calculator a number of times. What, for example, would you have really your eye on that is typical to the way Irish farmers are really keeping an eye on their costs? That wasn't done here.
Yes, they feed their cows well. They have a high input system. And they have high kgs of milk solids, 650, 700 kgs of milk solids. But I just didn't feel that they had the proper costs, analysing, say, their fuel costs on the farm, their fertiliser costs, maize costs. Didn't seem to have the answers on hand, which was very, very surprising, because if you went into any other farm in Ireland, good farms, good profitable farms, and this was a research farm, I just didn't feel that they had the accountancy to detail their the breakdown on milk price. It just wasn't there when I thought it is there, much more readily available in the farmer's mind and head at home in Ireland.
Now, on the other hand, there were things here that were done in a lot more advanced way than in Ireland. We looked at the way people work together. Any lessons that you would bring home here in terms of sharing machinery, sharing land, sharing buildings, even we've seen in some cases?
Yeah, it was a big eye-opener, something I wouldn't have thought about much before. I think we're our own worst enemies in regarding to that. It broadens the mind. Yeah, I think that we have to share machinery going forward. Standing on our own, we're incurring huge financial costs. If we can spread a machine, obviously it had its complications because the climate in France is much easier to deal with, and the time frame is a little bit, they have more time. We don't, but I think with a little bit of thought and a little bit of organising there, that partnerships, sharing machinery, joining up, definitely has changed my mind big time, and look at things in a much more different way now.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Enjoy the rest of the trip.
Thank you very much.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
The popularity of fixed milk price schemes is growing, none more so than those at Glanbia. Anthony Jordan caught up with Sean Malloy, Director of Strategy and Supply at Glanbia, to talk about the growth of the dairy food company's fixed milk price schemes, from uptake to milk volumes.
Yeah, we've about 20% of our milk volumes now in fixed milk price schemes, or we will have when the current contracts are realised. That's grown over the years. We started out around 10 or 11%, and it's grown both in terms of our ability to grow that in the market with our customers in the international markets, but also because there's a very strong appetite at farm levels to get involved in volatility proofing in their milk price.
In terms of 2017, is there any projections for how many uptakes or people uptaking the scheme will be?
Today we have about 40% of our farmers, and on average they have about 30% of their milk in schemes. My anticipation is that 40% will grow because there is a great understanding now of the need to proof against volatility, and with that growth I'm hoping that the average uptake then will also increase. In truth, over the last 2 years there's been more of a demand at farm level than we've been able to satisfy, and our ambition now is to continue to support that demand by able to produce more milk into schemes of this nature.
Would the uptake, is there a big relationship between the increase and the volatility in the market this year and how the prices went low?
Yes, indeed. Well, if you look at it over the last 2 years, anybody who's been involved in the schemes has benefited very significantly, up to 6 cents a litre of an insulation against the lower market price. That's a very significant insulation for farmers to get in terms of security, and particularly for expanding farmers who are investing in their businesses and who are borrowing money, for them to have certainty of margin. And our schemes, whilst we describe them as fixed milk price schemes, in truth they're fixed margin schemes, which allows the price that the farmer receives to actually increase in the event that the input cost moves up, or indeed to go the other direction in a falling input environment. So therefore their margin is protected, and anybody investing or growing their enterprise very much appreciates that opportunity.
Have you seen scepticism from farmers who are essentially locking themselves into the scheme?
No, in truth, one of the things I would say, and I'm very happy to say this, we've now been involved in schemes as pioneers since 2011, and we have 2,000 farmers who have been very loyal to these schemes, and even in occasions where they were marginally behind the market, they have still been very supportive of the scheme. On average, over the full duration of the years that we've been involved in the schemes, the farmer has beaten the market, if that was the ambition, and indeed done that without having to pay an insurance cost, because the schemes don't have a cost associated with them in that regard.
Sean, thank you very much.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
We move now to the RDS, where the 2017 Young Scientist and Technology exhibition took place last week. Una Sinnott of the Irish Farmers Journal managed to grab the Best Group Award winners, Michael Sheehan and Jack Murphy from Coláiste de Trasa, Kanturk in County Cork, to talk about their project into how to protect the endangered hen harrier.
So Jack, can you tell me all about this fantastic project here in front of me?
Well, our project is about the prey availability for the hen harrier in managed farmland. As some people don't know, the hen harrier is extremely endangered in Ireland, and a big factor of it being endangered is competition of prey. So we decided that we should start monitoring the prey of the hen harrier to see where is it and what it's like in the habitats.
Okay, and what is a hen harrier?
A hen harrier is a species of ground nesting raptor.
And what's the story with its population around the country?
There's about 108 to 157 breeding pairs left in Ireland, which is very little.
Now, Michael, can you tell me why you're interested in hen harriers?
Well, see, the hen harrier is actually found in our local area in the North Cork region, and we hear of a lot of people being affected by it on their land, and people being frustrated because of the restrictions placed on their land. So we decided to undertake a project on the hen harrier, and we went with the prey availability side of things. So basically, the whole aim of the project was to be able to guide people on the best methods for monitoring prey on their farmland. So we tested 6 different methods: small mammal trapping, analysis of hen harrier pellets, comparison of abundance of droppings in bait pots, DNA analysis of droppings, word transects, and mapping using ArcGIS.
So I see 3 rosettes in front of me here. Can you guide me through each of them, Jack?
Well, the first one was the Special Award. It's the Environmental and Protection Agency Award. The second one was the First Group Award. And now the last one is the Best Group Winner 2017 Award.
Now, can you tell me about the farmer schemes that any regular farmer, why would they be interested in this project?
Well, with this project, it's very relevant to a new locally led agri-environmental scheme. So what this is all about is farmers will be rewarded for their work in the conservation of the hen harrier within their SBAs. So basically what will happen is if the farmer goes out and does work to help aid the population of hen harriers, they'll then be paid by the Department of Agriculture. So for example, one of these things that they could do is monitoring prey. So what we've done is we've set out a number of guidelines for them to follow while monitoring prey.
Okay, and how are you going to get these guidelines into every household in Ireland?
Well, we're going to send it to the Department of Agriculture, and hopefully then they'll send it out to the farmers that live in SBAs. And so hopefully then it'll become effective, basically.
Now, you were on the Late Late Show on Friday night, Friday 13th, and was that a big deal for you? Are you a huge fan of the Late Late Show by any chance?
I watch it sometimes now, but it's very big, to be honest.
Yes, it is huge. What was it like to walk out on the stage?
Well, I suppose it's something that not many people have ever experienced before, and it's something unique that we'll have done. It's probably something we'll never forget.
Now, what sort of prizes are you taking back to Cork with you?
For the first group, I think we get 2,500, and for the special award, we get a glass plaque.
Fantastic. Do you have any idea how you're going to spend your money?
Not at the moment, but we'll make sure I get something nice for myself anyway.
Okay, congratulations again. Well done.
Thanks very much.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Finally, 1st of February is deadline day for filling out CAO forms. Mary Phelan, careers editor with the Irish Country Living magazine, has a special 8-page CAO supplement in this week's paper. And she went through some of the highlights of the supplement with me earlier in studio.
So this CAO supplement is focused on filling out your CAO form and making the most informed choice that you can so that you will be fulfilled and happy in the college course that you do get when the Leaving Cert results come out next August. So the CAO deadline is the 1st of February, as most Leaving Certs know, or at least should know at this point. It's kind of closing in, and these 8 pages therefore are very timely, and the articles range from top 10 tips on filling out your CAO form, the form itself basically, to articles on apprenticeships, because of course not everybody maybe will be interested in going to college. They might fill out a CAO form anyway. They probably should fill out a CAO form anyway, but if they're interested in going down the apprenticeship route, there is some information on that. And then also there are articles on careers maybe that don't have such a straightforward route to them. So for example, teaching or medicine, it's fairly straightforward how to become a teacher or a doctor, but people might be very interested in working in politics, but maybe mightn't be interested in being a TD, a minister or an MEP. But there are lots of jobs in politics, and we speak to 2 people who carved out careers kind of behind the scenes in politics, and we find out how they did it. So maybe you might be able to channel the career of those type of people. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe someone like in the communication sector in politics or something like that.
Exactly. We actually, one of the people that we speak to is Jonathan Hoare, and he is the Special Advisor to Minister for Agriculture, Michael Creed. Okay. So very interesting story to how he arrived in his role, and it's a kind of a job that Leaving Certs mightn't really think about, but actually would be very interested in doing. So very interesting to hear how he got there.
Absolutely. And you have advice as well, Mary, for parents in this supplement, because parents are usually very involved in the process as well.
Yeah, too involved sometimes, some might say. But of course, it is a stressful time for parents as well, and they have a very important role to play. So Betty McLaughlin from the Institute of Guidance Counsellors, she has some very solid advice. She has some top tips as well as delving into it a little deeper. And I thought that one of the interesting things she says is to respect the point of view of young people and kind of show that you're respecting their point of view. I mean, it sounds so logical, but I actually think it's something that a lot of parents maybe don't really show, that they really value the opinion that their child has on their own future.
It's probably slightly panic as well, because they feel like this is the beginning of the rest of their child's life.
Exactly.
So it's slightly, it's coming from a good place, but it can kind of come across as a little bit maybe too involved.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're trying to ensure their child's future at the end of the day. So I think that there is some excellent advice from her there. So I would strongly encourage parents to read it.
Okay, and what other articles have you got in the supplement, or would you highlight?
So the other articles I would highlight include what I did with an arts degree. I think there are many parents, again, out there, when they hear arts degree, mightn't be too enthusiastic about it, because again, it's a degree that doesn't have a kind of ready-made job that a student or a graduate can enter at the end of it. But our very own news editor here in the Farmers Journal, he did an arts degree. So we speak to him and find out how he went from arts to the position that he has now. And we also speak to Aoife Kane, who is an events manager at Green Life Events, and she also studied arts in NUI Galway. Patrick did it in UCD, and they're just two examples. I really wanted to show that, you know, I think parents, I know that my parents are always very interested in finding out what kind of a job exactly can you do with this degree that we are pumping so much money into, in terms of your education. That, you know, this is a lot of financially for us, it's a lot of investment. So what potentially could we get out of it? What kind of a role will you get out of it? There is also an interview with Dr. Sheila Willis from Forensic Science Ireland. You know, when people hear about her type of a job, it's almost like something out of CSI or Criminal Minds. So she's kind of showing that this is a potential route that you can go down with a science degree. I mean, it's probably the more glamorous end of it. There's not a huge amount of roles in it, but it's definitely an example of what somebody can do with a science degree. So I find that very interesting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, have you any parting words of wisdom?
So I would say to just bear in mind that there is a huge focus being placed on apprenticeships by the government, and that, you know, going to college is not the be all and end all. Someone can have just as fulfilling and as well paying a career, I would say, as well, by going into an apprenticeship, but maybe fill out a CEO form to have it as backup. There's no harm in having both options, but certainly, you know, not to discount that route. But also Betty McLaughlin highlights a few interesting statistics which I thought were worth quoting. A study in 2014 by the ESRI, which tracked about 900 students through the second level system and beyond, found that many were ill prepared for making decisions about college. Now, the ESRI attributed this to inadequate career guidance. That is hopefully going to change. There is more investment coming with that down the line, hopefully. But she does point out that on average about 1 in 6 first year college students do not continue to the second year of their course. So I don't want anyone listening to this podcast to end up in that situation if they can at all help it. So get as informed as you possibly can. I think the number one thing is to speak to students who are studying the course that you are interested in, particularly if it's a course like law, which you don't really get any exposure to in your secondary school leaving cert subjects. For those types of courses in particular, I would speak to students currently studying them and just find as many ways as you can to become as informed as you can. And that's really what we're trying to do with the CEO supplement. So make sure that you pick up the Farmers Journal this week as well.
Okay, absolutely. And it's not the end of the road, though, as you say, for students. College is not the end of the road. You know, there's so many options after it as well.
There really are. And I mean, if they start asking around, they'll find lots of people in their mid to late 20s and early 30s who maybe the college route was not successful for them, and they still have very successful careers. So not to lose sight of that. But at the same time, this is your time to try and make the best and most correct decision for you. So while you have the opportunity now, why not try and make the most of it so you don't end up in a situation where it doesn't work out.
Okay, and students and parents can read that CAO supplement in this week's Irish Country Living. Thank you, Mary.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.